Building the quietest keyboard for 25 bucks means we have to make some compromises. The biggest one being, we need to start with a pre-built board and tear it all down, because it's really hard to find even useful keycaps for $25. We will start with this eUso Z88 that I found for $12.59 on Amazon. It's got acceptable keycaps and even hot swappable switches, which legitimately surprised me when I opened up the box. I really thought that a board of this price would have everything soldered down. I even had the good old desolderer on standby. But good on you, eUso. I think the most economical way to get the best performance here is to take what we've got and make it better. It's not like we could totally replace everything internally or even anything internally. $17 doesn't get you very far in the world of custom mechanical keyboards. And a quick aside, because I can't let this go, holy crap, do I really like the base version of this board. For $12, you get reasonable keycaps, hot swappable switches, decent sound, and a removable USB-C cable. I wasn't planning on being this impressed with the base board for this video, but dang. Luckily, we were able to get the version of the eUso with Otemu red switches. Having these linear pre-stage as our switches for this build should go pretty darn far towards making this as quiet as possible. So let's take these suckers apart and start the lubing process. I've got a small tub of G-Lube left over, so using a complicated math technique called eyeballing it, I'll consider this like 1/20th of the cost of a full container, so we will add $2.80 to our total for this build. Personal note from one keyboard fan to another, I really hate opening Otemu switches because I have to use the other side of my switch opener and my claw cracker just straight up won't work. The claw cracker is like 50% of why I even open switches in the first place. It's so sad. That crack is so satisfying. We do have some wiggle room left in the budget, so let's add switch film to these as we're closing them up. We need to add about half a container of film that will increase our bill by $4.96. We're getting pretty far into our budget here and we are getting close to our limit, but don't count our wallet out yet. I think it can still get us some really cool stuff before we're done. Let's move over to the stabilizers. Pretty easy here, just takes a little bit of work to disassemble, lube, and grease these up to enjoy their life on this board. I am going to lube these a little more aggressively than I normally would because the point of the board isn't necessarily to have the best feeling typing experience, it's to be the quietest, and those two aren't always the same thing. I wasn't initially planning on this, but because we're this far into the build and we still have some money left over, we need to make this thing even quieter by painting it. It's science. Just like racing stripes make your car faster, a more subdued paint job will make your keyboard quiet. You can't argue with me. Them's the facts. To do this proper, we're gonna need both primer and the spray paint. So we'll factor in 1/3 of a can of both, which will cost $1.50 for the primer and $2.37 for the paint, bringing us pretty well right in line with our budget. So first up, you gotta scuff up the board if you want the paint to hold, and we will get the primer set to go. I was only going to paint the case and leave the plate alone, but the sparkliness of the plate was just too loud. It was too loud, I could hear it over the spray paint, so it needs to be subdued a little bit too. Once the paint is totally dry, we still need to fix one of the biggest culprits in noise, the case itself. Unfortunately, we've run out of money for anything fancy like a silicone pour or any other fancy additions, so we'll do a standard mod that I've done in the past and just fill this sucker full of very dense duct tape called gaffer's tape. It's got enough weight and heft that it should add enough density to the case to keep us from having any sort of hollowness while we type. I don't know how much of a roll of gaffer's tape we actually used, but it's almost nothing, so let's arbitrarily call it 70 cents. When we add the next 7 cents, that it brings us all to $24.99, because that's kind of like the keyboard that you would find on the Home Shopping Network. We do have half a Band-Aid left over from a previous build, so let's use that on the plate where the switches fit in to make sure they have zero wobble. If we've gone through the problem to make sure the switches themselves don't make noise, we can at least keep them in place. That half of an adhesive bandage comes out to a grand total of 7 cents, again bringing us to $24.99 and well under budget. Whew, okay, and we are back. Everything's dry, everything's ready to go. Let's assemble this and see just how quiet of a keyboard we were able to make sure that we were able to build the quietest keyboard for $25. I think the spray paint turned out amazing. I was thinking when I bought the spray paint that it was going to be a little more darker, but as you can see here, it's kind of like an industrial gray. Like it looks like unpolished steel almost. I love how this looks, by the way. It looks incredible. It's still kind of sparkly, so while it's not pink and sparkly anymore, it's kind of like gray and sparkly. Boom, check that out. That came together real nice. Feels pretty solid. I do wish we had had enough money in the budget to do silicone. Silicone just makes all of this stuff sound the absolute best, so it is disappointing that we don't have that, but the gaffer's tape will sound good enough, I hope. Let's pop the switches in here and get to it. Boom, and the switches are in. That is gonna sound so good. It's gonna be a very, very darn quiet little $25 keyboard. Okay, let's pop the keycaps on. Okay, we now have the board all put back together, and I gotta tell you, I don't hate it. I thought I was really gonna dislike these keycaps combined with the gray background. I was gonna spray paint the keycaps too, but I didn't really know how I was gonna be able to spray paint them all. So I'm really happy with how this turned out. But we're talking about the Quietest keyboard. Now, this is what it sounded like without any of the modifications we did today. Okay, now let's see how this sounds. Honestly, I think it sounds really good. There's a few switches in here that sound like they're not agreeing with the film. So if I were to do this all over again, I probably would not have included the film on these. They work better on the Cherry MX switches. I have had problems with films on Otemu in the past, but I think this turned out pretty darn good. And if you like this video, hit subscribe and then click here to watch us upgrade a $10 mechanical keyboard. Thanks for watching.